for joining me for episode 19 of My Doll's House Diary. Now I'm pleased to say that since the last episode I've finished the lining paper and I've also done a little bit more work in the study. So let me show you what I've been up to. I don't know if you remember or not from the last episode, but I'd papered this room and above the door it had gone rather crinkly, and also on that back wall there was one big crease right across the back, and I was just going to do the bit by the door, but I've actually redone the whole lot. So I peeled back the whole sheet and I've redone the entire room. And actually that peeled back quite easily, which proves I probably hadn't put enough glue on, and that's what was causing the creases where the paper wasn't actually sticking to the wall. So another good tip, whether you're using glue or wallpaper paste, make sure you've given the area real good coverage before applying the paper, and that should cut down on the wrinkles. And then blasted it with the hairdryer and it all shrunk back really nicely actually. So that's that room done, and then I had those two landing areas to do. So there's the sort of central landing there, that's all done, and the entrance hall also done. And I remember I said to you in the last episode, it just felt like this particular job has been going on for so long, and then to top it all I ran out of paper, so I had to go and get some new paper. So it just sort of dragged on and on, but now it's done, and I feel so relieved that it's finally done, and it feels good, the whole house now all papered and ready to go, ready to start again. I also went around and trimmed sort of all the paper from around the doors, the little bits that were sort of overhanging, and along the edges of the actual doll's house here. So I've done all the trimming. I'm going to clear sort of the bits out of the kitchen because I'm worried when I start work on the room above that I'll be sort of knocking things off. So I'll clear that room out, and then I'm going to start on the study. Now what I want to do today is fill in the sort of opening of the chimney breast there, and I want to paint that black, and then I want to complete the hearth. I'm going to have that overhanging lip on there, so I'll show you that. And my skirting and coving has just arrived, so I'm going to show you that as well. And I might even try and get a coat of paint on the walls today. So I've removed the tape and I've sanded this all over, and also sanded it on the feet and along the top as well to make sure the edges are all straight. And what I actually want to do now is line this opening. Now the fireplace that I'm actually using for inspiration is black on the inside, so that's what I want to do here. I'm actually going to line this inside, and I'm going to use this brick paper to do that. Although I'll be painting it black, I want the bricks to be showing through, and this paper is embossed, so the actual shape of the bricks should show under the black paint. And I'll be using this paper to line all of the fireplaces, and in some of them I'll be just leaving it as the brick like this. So I've cut a piece that's just about as high as the opening there. Now I only want it to overlap a tiny bit at the side. I'm going to be covering this with a surround, so I want the paper to be covered. I don't want you to be able to see that line under then my wallpaper, so I only want it to be, and that's probably only about 10 centimetres or 3/8 of an inch in there. So make your fold. Nice sharp fold along the edge of that first side or leg piece. And we come in like that, and I want to make a fold along there as well. And then once you've got the fold there, you can crease it in like that. And then we're just going to do that over the other side as well. Make sure the first fold is staying in place. And then fold along the second leg. Like that. And I'll crease those in again, make a nice sharp crease. So we've just made an insert, and then I think I'll just cut it along this line of the bricks here, so I've got about the same amount as I've got over the other side. Like that. And then I actually want to glue this into place. So let me just dispense some glue. I'm just going to use my tacky wax for this. I don't actually think the nozzle works now. The nozzle is a bit gummed up. So you actually only need to apply this along that edge where that paper is going to fold over, and then on the inside edge of each of those sort of leg parts. And the top part up there I'll just be painting black. Over that side as well. Then we can stick the bricks into place. Push the creases right into the corners. Make sure you're level at the bottom of the leg as well. And I just want to put a little bit of masking tape along each of those side pieces, which is sort of trying to ping upwards. Like that. And I'm just going to put a couple of bits along there as well, just to hold the paper against the side there. And this bit of paper will actually be stuck to the wall of the doll's house, otherwise I would have used a piece of wood behind there to secure it, but there's no need as that will be going directly onto the wall. Do the same there. I'm going to leave that to dry, and then to paint that I've got this again Faro and Ball paint, and it's called Off Black, so I'm not going to go jet black with it. I want it to look more like a sort of sooty black, and this was rather I've had it for quite a while, and the lid wasn't on properly because I obviously hadn't cleaned it off properly before I put the lid on, so it'd gone a little bit claggy, a bit sticky, so I just put a tiny little drop of water in there, probably a quarter of a capful of a sort of bottle of water, tip that in there, and it's sort of gone a bit smoother. So once that glue has dried, I'll apply that. Whilst that's drying, I've made a start on the hearth, and I've cut the bottom piece so that it's 2mm, that's 5/64 of an inch, narrower on both sides and along the long front edge, so the back will sit flush like that, and then you've got that overhang all the way around, like that. And then I just want to get rid of the sharp edges on the top piece, so that will remain as it is. But then this piece, I'm just trying to look for a medium grade. I just want to round off the edges. Now I don't want to create a round or a bevel, but I just want to round off the very sort of top edge of the piece. So I'm just holding it at a 45-degree angle and just sweeping the paper along that edge. Just tidy up the side as well. So I'm just sort of taking off that sharp edge. It just makes it look more finished. And then I can just tidy up the corners as well. Take that sharp point off. Like that. And that will sit on top of there like that. And you've got a more sort of finished piece rather than just the two pieces of wood glued together. So I'm just going to sand off this top piece now to get it ready for paint. So just sand the entire surface. I'm going to apply glue to the bottom part, and I've got my clamps here ready. Just spread that out. And I'll just pop that on top like that and get the back edges straight, and then I'm just judging by eye for that overhang at either side. And that looks about right. So I'm just going to hold on to it and remove that excess glue from around the edges. Make sure I've got a nice flush back edge. And then I'm going to clamp it all together. Turn it that way around. And really important again that you clamp, because the wood tries to separate, as you can see it's doing there at the corner. And I'm just going to fit all of these on. Just trying to spread them out evenly. And a couple around there. Now I can get one more in there. Looks a bit overkill, doesn't it? But then I know I'm going to get a really well glued solid piece. I'm just going to go back in there with the cocktail stick. And it's just so much easier to get the glue whilst it's still tacky like this, otherwise it dries into those little sort of hard bobbles. Okay, so I'll leave that piece to dry now, and I'll check if the paper has dried, and then I can apply the paint to that. This is now dried, so I'm going to paint it. The masking tape has pulled off a little bit of the paper at either side, but that's okay because that's those pieces that are going to be covered. I've got my paint here, I've given it a good stir. So I'm now going to leave that to dry. And I don't know if you can catch that on camera, but you can see the bricks in there, the outlines of the bricks, and that's the look I wanted. So I'm really pleased with that. I'm going to paint the hearth now as well, which has been drying for probably a couple of hours now. And I've put a little tape handle on the bottom there so that I can paint around these edges without getting paint on my fingers. I'm just making sure I get the paint right along that sort of groove under there, otherwise you'll still be able to see bits of wood showing. And once it's dried I'll have a sort of good look round just to make sure I can't see any natural wood poking through. It's got a nice sheen on it as well. So I'm now going to leave that to dry. And whilst that's drying, I just want to show you the skirting board and coving that I've bought for the study. So I've got my skirting board and coving here. And let me show you the coving close up. I'll show you from the side there. That bit will go along the ceiling. So this side is the bit that comes down the wall, and I really like that sort of double groove underneath there. And I actually just picked this out of the catalogue as being the one I liked the best, but then when I've got it and looked at my old pieces of coving from the doll's house, this is actually exactly the same, and that wasn't intentional. It's just that it was the one I liked the most in the catalogue. So that's that, and I've just ordered 4 pieces for now. They're much longer than the room. These are 18 inches. The room is 15 inches on the longest wall, but I always just like to have a bit extra for cutting around like the fireplace and everything. If you make any mistakes or anything, it's good to have an extra piece or 2. And I'll be using this one throughout the house, so none of it will go to waste. And then the skirting I'm not so happy with. It from the side there, so it's got that sort of bit of a lip and then that rounded strip, but it's not very high, and although I did look at the measurements, I just pictured it as being a little bit higher, so I pulled out the one that I used before, and this is it, and that's what I thought this would be like, because it's got that sort of groove and then rounded bit that runs along the top there. And I've just sort of gone and held this new one up against the wall in the doll's house, and I do think it is a little bit short. So I think I'll probably reorder, or I'm just wondering actually if I could just make my own again and bevel along the top edge, so it wouldn't have that detail, but I could then make it as high as I wanted. So I'll have a think about that, but I'm not going to use this one, so I will list it in the shop as soon as I can find some boxes. The tubes actually make the postage very high because they're quite heavy just on their own, the postal tubes that you can buy. So I'm going to try and find some long, sort of thin boxes that still fall in with that small parcel cost, but that will take these strips and things, and I can start supplying skirting and coving and all the other wooden mouldings and things, which I'd like to do. Okay, so that was that. For the walls of the study I'm going to be using this mushroom emulsion paint, and it's a lovely sort of creamy beige paint, and one that I use for a lot of my furniture pieces. Now I've had a go at printing my own wallpaper, and I'll show you that process in a moment, but because I'm just printing it onto sort of normal 100 GSM printer paper, I want to paint the wood of this in the colour that I'm going to be doing the walls, just so that this wood doesn't show through and it gives it a nice base. So I just want to be really careful of the black paint that I've already applied. I'm not going to mask it off or anything because I don't want the tape peeling off any of the paper or the paint. So I'll just be careful. So that's one coat of paint on there, and one coat is all it will need. It's just to provide that base so that, like I say, you can't see the wood through the paper. So I'll leave that to dry as well. I picked up several of these little sample pots in B&Q the other evening. That's our local DIY store. And I've got here several sort of off-whites, some very pale sort of greys and things like that, and mainly I picked them up for the walls of my craft room, which you know I'll be decorating shortly, but then with the intention of using them for the doll's house and other projects. So I want to test now something for the ceiling and that I will use for all of the ceilings throughout the house. So I've got here a piece of the lining paper which I've used on the ceiling. So I'm going to start by testing this one called North Pole, and you really can never tell in those shops, can you, because the lights are so strange. But now I've got it home, it looks, I don't know, it looks, in the pot it looks like a sort of off-white, but the little colour patch on the top looks a little bit greyy. So let's have a look, give it a good shake. I've got a brush there, but I might as well use the little sample brush. Looks quite nice actually, not too bright. I don't want anything that's going to be too bright. Okay, let's try, what have I got here? Ottawa. That is actually quite creamy. That's quite nice though. I'm wondering if might use that for the furniture in the room. I'll see how that dries. I don't want the furniture to be too pale. Alright, what's next? Vancouver. I've got a bit of a link there. Now this may be a little bit too grey. Yeah, I think it is. It's quite nice though. It's sort of like a cross between a grey and a taupe. Probably can't really tell on camera at all. When they're dry I'll sort of hold the camera up and see if you can see a bit better. Now that might come in quite handy because I wanted a pale grey to do a primer for the floorboards and then do the white over the top, and then you get that nice sort of almost driftwood sort of look, which is what I want. But I think as far as the ceilings go, so far I'm leaning towards the North Pole. They're not completely dry yet, but just to show you the colours a bit better, I've got them closer to the window. So that's the North Pole in the middle there, the one I'll be using for the ceilings throughout the doll's house. And then I rather like that creamy one there, possibly for the furniture, but what I'll do is I'll try that onto a piece of wood and see what the colour comes out like. But that's the sort of colour I'm going for, that sort of creamy yellow. Probably yellow isn't the right shade, but you know, that nice sort of creamy colour. And then that one was too grey, but I'll be able to use that for that flooring base coat like I talked about earlier. So I packed away all of the miniatures from the kitchen, and I've just moved the furniture all to the back of the room there, and I've got some kitchen towel laid there in the entrance just in case there's any splashes. I've got my paint and a 1/2 inch brush which I'm going to use now for the ceiling, and I think it's going to be one of those jobs where I'm going to have to sort of climb inside, so I won't be able to record, but I'll show you a before and then an after, and it's not going to look that much difference because it is just a pale paint. Okay, let's get started. So that's one good coat on there, and I did a thick coat just because I don't want to have to do a second coat, but obviously if it did dry patchy then I would do another coat. But a good tip is to use something like a little light, and I've got this here, which I pinched off my husband. And when you're painting light onto light, it just helps to show you where you've been. So that's a good idea. If you've got a torch or something, then actually prop that somewhere in the room and that will help. And it has gone a little bit wrinkly, but I'm not worried about that because I know from when I did the kitchen, when I painted straight onto the lining paper, it went wrinkly, but it does shrink back. So I'll come back and have a look at this in the morning when it's completely dry, and I'll show you that that will shrink back again. So that's the ceiling. I won't get onto the walls today now, but that will be probably my first job tomorrow. And I'm waiting for the flooring to arrive, and again I hope that's going to be here tomorrow, and then we can get on with that as well, and that's going to make a real difference to the room. So it's the next day now and the ceiling paint has completely dried, and I just wanted to show you how those wrinkles have shrunk back as the paint has dried. And it actually even looks better than it did before, where there was a little bit of a lump running from the copper tape. And that's shrunk back nicely as well. A few little patches that I'll need to touch in. So I'm going to do that next, and then I'm going to paint the walls. I just actually remembered, before I paint the walls I need to sort out this window frame. So I'm going to give it a gentle sand, and then I'm going to use the paint that I mixed up for the doll's house kitchen, which I used for the furniture and the skirting board. I'm going to use that, which is slightly lighter than the mushroom. I don't want to use a bright white because I think it will stand out too much in this room, which is going to be predominantly cream. So I've got a 240 grade sandpaper here, so I'm just going to go around the frame with. And I'm actually just going to do this outside bit of the frame. I'm not going to touch these bits inside because they've got the acetate over them, and I don't want to have to take all of the acetate out. So I'm just going to go around the outside. The dust off. So that's the first coat of paint on the window, and that is going to need a couple of coats. So I'll leave that one to dry, and in the meantime I just want to fix a mistake I've made on the hearth. So I tried this in the doll's house last night just to see how it would look, and it just dawned on me as I was sort of trying to picture how I would do the little bench that I'm going to have sort of built in underneath the window, and that will run from this edge, that I should have done a straight edge along this side of the hearth, because I want to sort of build the little seat out from there, and I'm going to need a straight edge along the bottom there. So I've recut it. Hopefully I'll be able to use that somewhere else in the doll's house, so I'll keep hold of that for now. But I've recut the pieces, and let me just line them up and I'll show you what I've done. So I've just cut it 2mm shorter than the top piece this time, rather than the 4, so that I've just got the overhang at that edge, and then I've got this nice straight edge along here. And I also haven't rounded off that top edge along this side. I've just done that side and around the front, and I've left this corner straight as well, just to give me a nice flush straight edge there. And when I tried it in, because I'd done this hearth just as wide as the chimney breast, I actually didn't really like how it looked on that side, so I've done it a little bit longer this time. So if I stand that into place, I've got that nice flush edge there, and then I've got just that little bit of an overhang at that side, which I think actually looks quite nice. And I've only done it about 4mm, so that I don't take away too much room from that side of the chimney breast where I want to stand a little desk or a little table. And when I come to do the skirting board, I'll fit it around the hearth over the top, and then we'll just cut a little tiny bit out to fit into the little overhanging bit into the little lip, but we'll come on to that. But I just prefer having that little bit of an overhang at that side. It looks more as though it's meant to be, rather than just being exactly the same width. But obviously that's, when you're doing yours, that's entirely up to you. It's just a preference thing, really. Okay, so I'll glue these new pieces together, and then once that's dry I can apply a coat of paint. And I'm thinking as well of giving that a nice coat of clear varnish once it's done, just so it doesn't have that matte look. The window frame is now painted, and I ended up doing 4 coats on there to get a good coverage, and I allowed the paint to dry between coats. So I'm now going to paint the walls. So I'm just using my smaller brush to start, to go around the outside edge of the window frame so I don't go over any of that lovely paint. That's the first coat of paint done, and it's obviously going to need another coat because it looks quite patchy, but I'll wait and see what it looks like when it's dried. And I also think it looks a little bit dark, but I think I thought that when I used it in the kitchen, and that dried a lot lighter. So again, I'll wait and see what that looks like in the morning. That was the same paint in the kitchen, and that's just dried, well, very pale, like a nice pale cream, and that's what I wanted in there. You can just see by sort of moving between the 2 rooms there the difference. Now I know paint is a different colour when it's wet and it's going to be darker. So like I say, I'll wait and see what that looks like in the morning. If it does dry this colour, or a little bit darker than I want, I have got another cream paint that I could use. So I could just do the second coat using that. So I'm going to leave it here for today. I've already made a start on the fire surround, so I'm going to put that into a separate tutorial. And I'll also do the flooring as a separate tutorial. So the next step in here, once the second coat of paint has been applied, is to make that flooring and fit that. Then we fit the hearth and the chimney breast and the fire surround with wallpaper already fitted, and then it will be the skirting and the coving, and that's sort of how the room will build up. I really hope you've enjoyed this episode. In a few days' time I'll share the tutorial for the fire surround, and after that we'll be fitting the stripwood flooring. If you'd like to be notified about both of those videos, hit the notification button, then you'll get a little ping when I upload the video. So that's it for now, and I hope to see you again soon. Bye!